From Svitek comes a weekly digital series where he shares his insights, concepts, and findings learned during his 15-year journey of working in the entertainment industry. Each lesson offers you a roadmap to overcome the challenges that all artists face on the path to success. Welcome to a Svitek podcast.
Hello, I'm Phil Svitek, 360 Creative Coach, and in this episode, I want to tackle the idea of forgiveness because I think right now more than ever it is very important. As we're quarantined, a lot of us have time to think and specifically think about the various relationships in our lives because we feel lonesome and isolated, right? And because of that, obviously, we're not thinking only just about the people in our lives, but also people that, perhaps we might have a little bit of a rocky relationship with. And that's where kind of forgiveness really comes in. This is a great time to really reach out and mend some bridges, in my opinion. I have a friend who actually has, in the past, like let's say within the year, they went from being best of friends to now, not really being friends because of something that had happened. And, I was on the phone with him and I didn't prompt him by any way, but I remember him saying to me like he felt bad and things like that, but at the same time he didn't want to like open up Pandora's box. And I said, listen, you don't have to like call, FaceTime, Zoom, whatever the case may be, but if you really feel in your heart of hearts like, hey, you're worried about this person, just shoot a text. Simple as that. And at least that'll just get the conversation going, but you don't have to like all of a sudden, tackle everything. You could just do a simple like, hey, in spite of everything, I hope things are okay, that type of thing. And actually that's going decently well for this person. It's opened the door. They haven't talked yet, but beyond just text, but at least like it's mending. It's starting kind of that way now. Whether or not it'll work out, who knows? We'll ultimately see, but at least it's a step in the right direction. The other kind of factor about forgiveness that I credit to Katherine Schwarzenegger Pratt, who I heard on Lewis Howes's School of Greatness podcast. And by the way, she wrote this book called The Gift of Forgiveness that I would encourage you to check out, where she interviewed various people and about the idea of forgiveness, and she kind of compiles it all together. It's a really wonderful book. So thank you to her for writing it, and I would encourage you to check it out. But on the podcast specifically, one of the things that really stood out to me was this idea that if you genuinely want forgiveness, and usually like when we think of forgiveness, it's between two people. You got to be sincere in how you do it, but at a certain point, it's up to the other person whether or not they forgive you, right? And so if you sincerely ask, this is a principle that she kind of figured out that really works, is if you genuinely ask for forgiveness 3 times and that person's not reciprocating, then you got to be able to forgive yourself and move on, because that person is not ready at the moment to forgive you. But that doesn't mean like that you shouldn't move on in life. And again, it has to be genuine, and it can't be like in quick succession, like, hey, do you forgive me? Hey, please forgive me. Please forgive me. Like, there has to be a certain amount of time, and there's no like arbitrary number that I can give you. You have to, ultimately kind of feel it in your heart of hearts of like what the right time is, and just try your hand at like, hey, I'm really sorry about that, and I know I messed up, and then you got to move forward. If after the 3rd time they're just unwilling to forgive, like, listen, at the end of the day, we're all human. We make mistakes and things like that, and you got to forgive yourself. That's as important as anyone else forgiving you. So that's something that I really took away from that conversation that Katherine Schwarzenegger Pratt talked about. And then kind of the other aspect that I've been thinking about a lot, especially as it pertains to right now, but in general as well. A lot of times, like, and the reason why right now is because I'm seeing a lot of things on social media, like all these various debates, political and everything in between. And, even myself, for as much like self-help books I've read and try to like get to a stage of enlightenment. I'm certainly not enlightened quite yet, and I have a long way to go. So I get triggered by certain things, and now the way I view it for myself, if for some reason someone says something upsetting to me, whether directly or just kind of through social media indirectly, is the more I'm hurt by it, or the more angered by it I may be, I realize like, wow, this is coming, like this is how deeply they're hurt. This is how deeply rooted their pain is and their trauma. Now, for them, they might not even ultimately care and things like that, but if it is a true attack and things like that, and I sense that, I think it most. There's a great quote by Krista Trippett that says like, anger is the externalization of fear. And I'm paraphrasing, that's not the verbatim quote, but I really do believe that to be true. And so when people attack you on social media or, more directly, let's say, it's coming from a fearful place. And so what I'm essentially trying to do is understand that and recognize it. And rather than me then combat them, really just understand that and try to be as compassionate as I can in that way. Now, I can tell you from experience, that doesn't mean I always just kind of forgive and so forth. Sometimes, part of that is like, I still need to process certain things and whatever. And so that's part of that is putting up a boundary of like allowing yourself to really, process your thing. And then when you feel ready, then kind of tackle it. Now, of course, you might run into the problem. They might have moved on, be angry with you and so forth. But there's this idea of always doing your best from Don Miguel Ruiz. It's a principle. And it doesn't mean like that you're without fault, but you always strive to do the best that you can, and your best is going to be fluid. So, in an ideal scenario, you could be amazing. But right now we're in quarantine and the world, for many of us, seems flipped upside down. So our best is not going to be our usual standard, and that's okay. But if you always just strive for your best, then, you can't ultimately have regrets or judgment against yourself. You could be wrong, but that doesn't mean you should berate yourself. And I think that also goes into it as far as, forgiving other people, but then also if you do make a mistake, forgiving yourself. And I think that's the real key of forgiveness. Ultimately, it's a two-sided coin. Like you have to both forgive other people, but you also have to forgive yourself. So these are some of my thoughts about forgiveness, and kind of, the lessons I've learned through the exploration, thanks to initiated by Katherine Schwarzenegger Pratt in having written this book and talked about it on various podcasts that I listen to, such as The School of Greatness. I would encourage you to check out whether that podcast or certainly her book. But I also imagine like you've dealt with forgiveness in all various forms. I'd be curious to know your thoughts and opinions about it as well. This barely scratches the surface of it. In a lot of ways, but I figured these were the primary things that were most important right now, certainly as I'm looking at them. But yeah, by all means, let me know in the comments section what your thoughts are, or hit me up on social media. Also, feel free to pass this along to anyone who might benefit from it. I would greatly appreciate it. And if you're not following me or subscribe and enjoy what I'm doing, I would encourage you to do so. That way you get the various stuff that I put out right when I put it out. And lastly, what I'll leave you on is I hope that you can find compassion for everyone in the world, because now more than ever I feel like it's the thing that we need, hence forgiveness. Bye.